Hello, my name is Ariel, and today I'm going to teach you the how-to do's of speaking to inform. To begin, let's talk about what is informative speaking. In a very simple definition, speaking to inform is just a way to impact knowledge or to enhance understanding, facilitate application of information, and it's really just a way to bring new understanding so that we can apply ideas to old issues, current issues, or new issues. And because they're so common, you've already given an informative speech without even knowing it. A lot of careers use informative speech, and it's actually a great skill set to have on your resume. Careers that use this often include teachers, driving instructors, tour guides, copywriters, risk prevention, law enforcement, social workers, human resources, and many, many more. So, now that we know what informative speaking is, let's ask ourselves what informative speaking is not. So, informative speaking is not persuasive speaking. I can't stress this enough. Informative speaking is not persuasive speaking. The difference between informative speaking and persuasive speaking is very simple. Informative speaking is just stating the facts. It's X, Y, Z. And they're credible facts too. It's all about teaching. The goal is to have a new understanding, to have your audience walk away with new knowledge. It's not to have your audience do something right away or to change something about their day-to-day life or how they believe in something. It's just to be XYZ. It's a lot like the instructions on the back of a cake. The instructions on the back of the cake are just, this is how to bake the cake. It doesn't tell you why chocolate's the best or why vanilla should be the number one cake. And a key thing to look out for to make sure that your speech is informative and not persuasive is to avoid using the word why at all cost. Avoid the word why. Why is an opinionated word. It's got a lot of you should do this because I said so to it. Why is an opinion word, and we don't want opinions in informative speeches. Information plus why equals persuasion. So when you're writing your speeches, just think to yourself, am I saying the word why? Am I giving opinion? And if you're giving opinion plus information, then you know you're doing something wrong. With that being said, informative speech is actually very important. Rules are types of informative speeches or informative writing that keeps us safe. Driving laws. Someone taught us that once, and now we know how to drive and to be safe and protect ourselves and protect others. It's really important because effective communicators know how to share ideas without giving opinions, because opinions aren't always necessary. Teaching is a very important leadership skill, and by doing informative speaking, you are teaching. Informative speak give valuable knowledge to others and helps us create new ideas and concepts. So, how do you begin writing this informative speak? So what I want you to think about is a pamphlet that you would find at the doctor's office or the DMV or AAA. You have a roadmap of sorts, right? And on the first page, you're gonna see a little insight to what's happening. And you kind of want to think about that in the same way that you go about your informative speeches. You're gonna always want to start with first asking yourself, is the information new Is the information relevant to the audience? And is the information actually useful? I bring this up because why is it every time I get to this slide, the dogs have to bark, my concentration is broken. So let's start this again. So let's talk about how to begin a speech. You want to create an informative speech by first asking yourself, what is new? Is this information new? Is it relevant to the audience? And is it useful information? Think of it almost like a pamphlet you'd find at the doctor's office or at the DMV or AAA. Those pamphlets are organized just the same way an informative speech should be. Nope, try it again. How to begin writing informative speech. You want to first ask yourself, is this information new? Is it relevant to the audience? And is it useful information? These three things can help you create and organize your informative speech to be very efficient. Think of it when you begin writing your informative speeches. Think about a pamphlet you'd find at the doctor's, their DMV that's explaining something to you. Goals. You always want to make sure you start with a goal. The goal for your speech is very important because it helps us organize and make sure things are clear. You always want to make sure you stress the purpose of your speech early on to let the audience know what you'll be speaking about. 3 common goals you often see in information speeches are providing new information or building on old information. This is something that you would see in more traditional schoolyard teaching sort of things. You'd go into like your lesson and like your teacher would be like, hey, remember when we talked about this? Or guess what? Today we're learning about this. Those are informative speeches that are the goal is to just give information out. There's also agenda setting, which is you could create awareness for a subject, and you could also be like, hey, don't forget to put this on your agenda. And then the last goal that's very often there is creating positive or negative feelings, and which sounds a little tricky. It kind of sounds like it's going into persuasive speaking, but it's more about like your words and your information that you give could really change someone's emotional state. For an example, if you wanted to give a speech on 9/11, you have to consider that that might be very emotional for some, and even more so for others. And so you want to make sure that you have your goal straight. Do you want to make people feel something? Do you want to set an agenda to raise awareness? Or do you just want to give out straight information? A perfect speech has a little bit of all 3. Moving on. There are 4 types of informative speeches. You could have speeches about objects, speeches about processes, speeches about events, or speeches about concepts. Object speeches are things about tangibles, right? Things that you could touch or people. It could be pizza, puppies, iPhones, makeup, skincare stuff, anything. And what you want to do when you're giving an objective speech is you want to be careful of the scope. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you could pick a subject that's really broad and it's just way too much information. And it wouldn't be adequate information to give you everything about this broad subject. So you want to narrow in your scope a little bit. Put it under a microscope. An example of this would be Nicolas Cage. Let's say that you've been dreaming of giving an informative speech about Nicolas Cage your whole life. Well, do you want to talk about Nicolas Cage from the day he was born to today? Or would you prefer to give a speech that's just about Nicolas Cage's movies from 1990 to '02. You see what I'm saying? Having a broader scope makes it harder and a lot more harder for your audience to follow. Harder for you, harder for them. If you just shrink it in, pin it a bit, then you have a more clear and precise speech. The next form of speech is the process speech. And process speeches is just a systematic series of actions that lead to a specific outcome as a result of a product. This is like the how-to do's, or how to make something, how something's done, or how something works. This would be the type of speech that you guys will be giving in your assignment for this week. Make sure that you pay attention to visual aids because they're the most helpful in this type of speech. And an example of this would be how to bake a cake. You would have like, these are my eggs, and this is my bowl of flour. Here's my spoon. Here's my vanilla extract. Visual aids are really helpful in this type of speech because you're actually showing something. You're actually doing it. That's also called demonstration, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. So, our next type of speech are event speeches. Event speeches are anything that has happened, is happening, or is going to happen, like baby shower, birthday, concerts, election night of 2024. So again, though, you want to be careful with your scope. You want to make sure it's adequate. You don't want to stand up there and talk about music festivals from the first one to today's. Really broad, not going to reach as many people. It's not going to be easily manageable. You're just going to give your audience overload if your subject or your topic is way too large. So instead, you could talk about like Coachella 2018. It's a little bit more adequate. It's more pinpointed. It's a lot more like XYZ. Very cute little package. The last speech is concept speeches. A concept is a belief, a theory, an idea, a principle, or a notion. When you give these concept speeches, you want to make sure that you avoid technical language and you define terms clearly, because sometimes, you could be talking about a concept, and if it's new information, people are going to be like, I don't know what that word means. And then they're going to be distracted and not paying attention. And you also lose credibility as the speaker, which is why when you are presenting something new, especially in concepts, you want to use examples and comparisons to illustrate the ideas or illustrate those terms. An example of this would be conspiracy theories, or describing to someone what it feels like to be in love. You're going to tell your own story so they could put themselves in that perspective. A lot of this is like, you even see it in reading when it says things like, an example of this is, and then it gives you like a big long synopsis. That's all concept speeches, but in text format. So, moving on to my favorite part of all this are the 3 hallmarks of information speaking, which are be thorough, don't be boring, and get organized. So, what is being thorough? Being thorough in a big old bubble is just checking the boxes. You're leaving no answers behind. Your audience isn't walking away with a, oh, but what about, what if, or didn't you forget? No, none of that. If you're being thorough, there's no answers left unanswered. There's no questions to be asked. That's what being thorough is. So, to be thorough, we must have a comprehensive knowledge of the topic that we're talking about, and be careful to not assume your audience knows what you're already talking about. And when you do this, it creates this credibility in you. And when a speaker leaves things out, it makes the speaker lose credibility, and it's distracting for the audience to follow the information being shared. So my advice is to only ever give speeches on topics that you're a master at. The next hallmark is, why not be boring? We all love being boring, right? So you always want to choose the right topic for your audience, and don't be too technical. All right, you want to make sure you have fun. You want an audience is like the average person, right? So make sure that you always do your research beforehand. Find out who the audience is. If you're talking to kindergartners, it's probably not a great idea to come in and talk to them about the stock market. They're going to find it boring. Instead, come in talking about ice cream, and don't be too technical. It should be like vanilla ice cream, strawberry ice cream. Really simple, kindergartners, right? And you can't assume what they know already. You also need to ask, what are the need to knows and the need to know? So sometimes you'll need to give need to know information. And need to know information is basically just significant information to understand. So ice cream, for an example, if you're going to give a speech on how to make an ice cream sundae, a need to know is like something along the lines of ice cream is cold cream. It's cream in a solid form. That's a need to know. Someone might not know what ice cream is. So you need to tell them what it is in its basic state. That's kind of like the boring stuff, right? But then you get to the really exciting part where you just start adding interest. This is called your need to know. It's like the ice creams, the stuff, or the sprinkles that you add on top of the ice cream. Something else to mention in why not be boring is that you could sometimes use humor to make your presentation seem a little bit more fun and a bit more creative, but don't use humor unless it's purposeful. Don't just say a joke to say a joke. Put meaning behind it. So just be creative. Lastly, how to be organized. Organized means that you used a strategic organizational pattern or system to achieve a goal. And there's 4 ways to organize your informative speeches. You could have a speech of description, and you could tell it in a spatial order. Like if you are describing Disneyland, you could say something like, the first ride in Disneyland is It's a Small World, and the last one's the Hollywood Terror Tower. Or you could organize your speech if you're doing a speech demonstration, which is what you'll be doing in your activities for this week. So pay attention here. Speeches of demonstrations are told in chronological order, kind of like how to build a sandwich. You're going to first start with washing your hands, and then you're going to start with a piece of bread, etc. This is what you'll be doing in your assignments for this week. Speeches of demonstration. You're going to be giving a process speech organized in demonstration. The third kind of organization for informative speeches are speeches of exploration. And here's something really exciting about speeches of exploration. It really depends on your topic. So if you pick a topic of how does electricity work, you could either tell it in chronological order or topical. And what I mean by that is you could either say, it first starts with you turn on a light switch and then the power goes woo and it goes to the light bulb. Or you could say there's this little part in the light bulb that gets warm and it connects with the glass part of the light bulb and it gets hot. So you could do it either 2 of those ways, but it really depends on your topic. You could also do an exploration speech on like Disneyland, and you could do it spatially too. Really just depends. And lastly, speeches of revelation, which are topical patterns, which would be like if you're giving a speech on the food pyramid, you would want to like organize it in a topical way, kind of like these are the grains and these are the vegetables. Or I also topically organized this presentation by first breaking down the goals or the 3 hallmarks and things like that. So before we move on, let's review. The big 3 hallmarks are: be thorough, don't leave anything behind. Don't be boring, be creative. And 3, get organized. Which then leads me to our 7 great takeaways for this lesson. As I said in the beginning, it's important to stress your purpose at the start. Then be objective. Give nothing but the facts. Third is to know your audience. As we've stressed before in previous lessons, knowing your audience could either make or break your presentation. You want to know who they are, what they know, and what they need to know. 4, never, ever, ever give your opinion in an informative speech. Remove why from your dictionary. Next, you want to keep it fun, keep it creative. Tell a joke when it's purposeful. Be fun, keep it active. Lastly, be thorough and get organized. Check your boxes. Don't leave your audience asking what if or what about or what about. Just finish it. Be thorough. Check your boxes. Make a list and check it twice. Lastly, get organized. There are 4 different ways of doing that. And it really just helps with clarity. That's the biggest takeaway from getting organized. It helps with clarity. It helps your audience follow along. So this ends my presentation for today. You can now go ahead and go onto Canvas and find your coursework for this week. Please make sure to do your activity, your assignment, and your journal, and your discussion post. In your journal and your discussion post, make sure that you leave 2 comments on people's posts that don't already have comments. And if you have any questions or concerns, please go ahead and give me an email that you can find on the syllabus. I hope you guys have found this to be very helpful, and I look forward to looking at your guys' assignments and grading your journals for this week. Thanks, guys.